The case for a government decision immediately to double the amount of the biofuel ethanol that's blended with petrol fuel here is compelling, according to a report published this morning and carried out by economist Jim Power, who joins us in studio. Jim, thanks for coming in. At the moment, we use a 5% blend of ethanol since 2005, as you point out in the report, but a lot of European countries use 10%, and this report says there's no downside and lots of benefits to immediately going to 10% here.
Yeah, a lot of countries like France, Germany, Sweden, Finland already use E10 or higher, meaning that for every litre of petrol, 10% is made up of ethanol. And the benefit of that is that, it is a significant carbon mitigator. So Ireland, as you say, since 2005 has E5, so 5% of our petrol is ethanol. If I've looked at the scientific evidence, and I'm obviously not a scientist, but I've looked at all of the scientific evidence, and it would suggest that if we doubled from E5 to E10, which could be simply done by ministerial order, it's no big deal. When we moved to E5, there was no problem, and there would be no problem going from E5 to E10, but it's estimated that could reduce our annual carbon emissions by 150,000 tonnes, which is the equivalent of taking 50,000 cars off the road. So as a carbon mitigator, the science seems to be absolutely impeccable. But I suppose from an Irish economy perspective, if you look at the recent climate action plan, which has come on top of a lot of other targets we have been seeking to achieve, at least in name, over the years, and haven't made much progress. But if you look at what's included in the climate action plan in relation to the electrification of the fleet, they're talking about by 2030 840,000 electric passenger cars on the roads, 936,000 electric vehicles in total, including vans, trucks, etc.
You'd call that target fanciful?
I think that target is fanciful. If you look at, we're coming in 2017, 0.1% of the cars on the road were electric. We want to get to 100% eventually. The infrastructure isn't there. The charging points and all of that, the battery technology is still not up to scratch. So I think the 100% is an incredibly positive aspiration, but I do think it's an aspiration. And what I would see is that this move from E5 to E10 would be a very good stepping stone on the road, the long road, I stress, to final electrification.
Now, it's important to point out that the report has been commissioned by a subsidiary of Clon Bio, a company I visited myself 3 or 4 weeks ago out in Hungary, owned by an Irishman, the largest single-site ethanol refinery in Europe. So it is coming from that direction. But as you say, you've looked at the science, you've gone through the figures. The reason ethanol is more carbon-friendly, reduces emissions, is that it's a crop. In the case of Hungary, it's maize, but it can come from sugar beet as well.
Yeah, sugar beet, cane, maize, and the plant down in Hungary, which you visit and I visited quite some time ago at this stage. But basically, for every farmer within at least 50 miles of the plant in Hungary, they have a ready market for their maize. The maize is turned into ethanol, and then the byproduct of that is used for other types of animal feed, but also it's been developed into sort of food nutrition for human beings. So it's an incredibly efficient type process, and that does work very well. And as I say, the proof of the pudding really is the fact that a number of other significant European countries are already on the E10 standard. And in fact, in France, I know you can pick up E85 for certain types of cars.
Your report suggests that if we were to double the ethanol blend in our petrol, there'd be no cost to the taxpayer or to the driver. It doesn't add additional cost to the litre of fuel, but that it would reduce our fuel imports. That suggests that you think there's a market for growing sugar beet here to produce it here at home.
Yes, I think so. I mean, if you look at what's going on in farming at a broader level at the moment, particularly in the beef sector, it is in beef. The beef sector is under serious pressure at the moment, and Mercosur is just the latest piece of pressure coming on it. So I think farmers need to increasingly look at diversification. So this is one option. I mean, maize is an option, but also sugar beet is an option. I find the arguments against this incredibly difficult actually to stand up.
So why isn't Richard Bruton, if this is an immediate way to reduce our carbon emissions, literally with the stroke of a pen, why isn't Richard Bruton bringing that forward rather than putting it out vaguely to some target of doubling our biofuel by 2030?
In the climate action...
Have the oil companies got to him?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my understanding is that nobody really in the industry is terribly against this as an aspiration. And I mean, from the point of view of the oil companies, full electrification, is a much bigger issue than adding ethanol to petrol. There are two typical arguments made against ethanol as a carbon mitigator in fuel. One is it creates food poverty and food shortages and pushes up food price inflation. Between 2005 and 2015, there's been a doubling of global ethanol production, and yet food and cereal prices today are at 2015 were over 20% lower than in 2005. The second issue revolves around engines. Would engines be able to take it? And certainly there is no issue with modern cars. I mean, when I say modern cars, I mean cars in the last 10 years. And in fact, in the United States, there has been no recorded instance of a car breaking down because of the use of ethanol in fuel. So I think that argument doesn't stand up either. So I just don't understand your question, Vincent, as to why Richard Bruton, is not going to go for this policy.
You reference a quote from an Oireachtas committee that has looked into renewable energy generally, and it suggests that regulatory or inertia barriers, bureaucratic barriers, may be the main issue why we don't make a quick decision on this rather than any technical issue.
Absolutely, yeah. There is no technical issue. I've looked into this a lot in the last just 15 months at this stage, and I'm told the science stands up, and the evidence around the world is that the science does stand up. So if you look at the economic impact of all of this, both from farmer diversification, from helping Ireland achieve its renewable energy source targets, which we're failing to do abysmally at the moment, and
particularly on transport.
That's the biggest issue. And the progress we have made on transport is largely due to double accounting of used cooking oil rather than the use of ethanol. So I think there is a very clean way to go about hitting our climate targets. And as I say, don't get me wrong, I think the full electrification eventually is where we have to get to. But this ethanol seems to provide a very, very strong stepping stone to get from here to there in a manner that will actually save the Irish taxpayer millions of euro per annum.
Okay, Jim Power, thanks for coming into this morning, and you're having a press conference later on today.
Between 12 and 2 today, yeah.
Publish that report, so let's see where that call goes. Coming up, Ian Quigley of Investec on markets. Stay tuned.